All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into some really critical conversations that happened at the Munich Security Conference. Conversations that are literally shaping the future of Europe. And we're not just going to look at the big political ideas, we're also going to break down the powerful language these leaders are using. So, if you want to understand the news on a deeper level, you're in the right place. Let's jump in.
So, if you had to boil down this entire, massive security conference to just one word, what would it be? Well, there was one. One single word that was at the heart of pretty much every conversation, every speech. It really set the tone for the whole thing. And on the surface, it sounds simple, right? But believe me, it's anything but. And boom, there it is. That's Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and he did not waste any time setting the stakes. For him, unity isn't some fluffy political concept. No, he frames it as a literal weapon. He calls it an interceptor against Russia's plans. Think about that for a second. He's saying the very survival of his country depends on this one thing.
Okay, so let's dig into this. Why was unity the big watchword? And more importantly, what does it actually mean when you start to peel back the layers? You know, this idea of a united front, it was everywhere. You heard it over and over. A great word journalists used was that the sentiment was echoed by different leaders. When you hear that something is echoed, it means it's being repeated, usually to show agreement. So from Zelensky in Ukraine all the way to leaders in the UK, the message seemed crystal clear. Europe has to stick together.
But of course, it's never that simple, is it? This is where things get really complicated. There's a fantastic phrase an analyst used. They said, there's a lot to unpick here. And unpick is a great verb. It means you have to carefully analyze all the complex little parts. Because you see, everyone loved the word unity. But what they actually meant by it, well, that was a whole different story.
Okay, so check this out. This really breaks down those different competing ideas of what unity means. You've got Ukraine, where it's literally about survival, a weapon. Then you have the UK and the EU trying to rebuild their relationship after Brexit. So for them, it's about leaning back into Europe. Then the USA comes in with some serious tough love, basically saying, hey, Europe, you got to go it alone sometimes because we're not the world's policemen anymore. And finally, you have the pragmatists, the realists, saying, hold on, let's be honest, the European Union is already divided. Perfect unity? That's just not realistic.
And this right here shows one of the biggest cracks in the whole idea of unity. It really comes down to this. Geography is psychology. Think about it. If you're a frontline state, right on the border with Russia, that threat feels incredibly real, incredibly immediate. But if you're a country way down south in Europe, adopting what they call a war mindset is, well, it's a really difficult mindset, as one reporter put it. It's not just about miles on a map. We're talking about totally different economic priorities, different political worries. It creates this huge psychological gap that's really, really hard to bridge.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. This problem has a name, Hungary. When you have a member of your own team, your own alliance, that's seen as pulling more towards Putin, how on earth do you create a unified strategy? It becomes almost impossible. It's a massive roadblock.
So, okay, the divisions are deep. We get it. What are the solutions being thrown around? Well, the first one is pretty extreme. The idea of putting Europe's entire economy on a war footing.
Now, let's make sure we're totally clear on this phrase, on a war footing. This is a really important term. It doesn't just mean spending a bit more on defense. Nope. It means a complete top-to-bottom transformation of a country's entire economy to produce stuff for a war.
So how would that even work? Well, people pushing this idea say it takes 3 huge steps. First, you shift production. So imagine car factories stop making cars and start making tanks. Seriously. Second, you cut all the bureaucratic red tape, all the paperwork and delays, so you can get weapons out the door way faster. And third, you basically convince private investors to put their money into defense companies instead of, say, new apps or consumer products.
And you can probably guess the reaction to this. It's a stark idea. That's a great adjective. Stark. It means harsh, severe, maybe even a little bit bleak. For a lot of Europeans, especially those in the South we talked about, the idea of basically copying Russia's own war economy, well, that's a really shocking and tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, so getting every single EU country to agree on a full-blown war economy, probably not going to happen. So that's where a second, more realistic solution comes into play, a different way forward.
And it's called the coalition of the willing. The concept is actually pretty simple. Instead of waiting for everyone to agree, you let a core group of countries, the ones who are willing and able, to move forward and take action now. It's a clever way to get around that political gridlock we saw with countries like Hungary.
And the key word here is flexibility. This isn't about forcing everybody to get on board. Countries that aren't ready for that war mindset, they could just opt out.
No pressure. This would let a smaller, faster, more motivated group lead the way, without getting bogged down by all the internal arguments.
All right, so now that we get the big picture, let's build our vocabulary toolkit. We're going to circle back to some of that key language we've already heard. Honestly, understanding these specific words and phrases is what helps you go from just watching the news to actually analyzing it.
First up, the verb to echo. We talked about this. When you read that a statement was echoed by other leaders, it's a huge clue. It tells you an idea isn't just one person's opinion anymore, it's become a theme, something that's being repeated all over the place to show agreement.
Next, to unpick. I love this one. When someone says a situation has a lot to unpick, it's like they're telling you the surface story is just the beginning. Imagine a giant tangled knot of threads. Unpicking it means you have to carefully pull each thread apart to see how it all connects. It's all about digging into the complexity. Okay, here's a fantastic idiom. With bated breath. You use this when you're talking about a moment of real suspense or anxiety. It literally creates a picture of someone holding their breath, just waiting to see what's going to happen. Oh, and a quick pro tip for your writing, it's spelled B-A-T-E-D. A lot of people mix that up.
And here's how it was used in context. Picture this. A U.S. senator is about to give a big speech. And everyone in the room, all these European leaders, are waiting with bated breath. Why? They wanted to know if he was going to go on the offensive and criticize them. See how that phrase just perfectly captures the tension in the room?
Next idiom, to pull up one's sleeves. This one is all about getting ready for hard work. You can almost picture it, right? Rolling up your sleeves before you dive into a really tough job.
And this is exactly how it was used to describe the message from the US. It wasn't just, hey, Europe, could you please spend more? No, the message was, Europe, you've got to pull up your sleeves. It implies it's time to stop talking, get serious, and do the hard work of paying for your own defense.
And finally, a really important military verb, to deploy. This isn't just about moving things around. It means moving troops or equipment into position for action. So when you hear that the UK is going to deploy a carrier strike group, that's a big deal. It's a signal of concrete action, not just talk.
So, that's where we're at. Europe is facing this huge choice, a real fork in the road. On one side, you have the radical idea of a war-footing economy. On the other, the more flexible, willing coalition. The path they choose, well, it's going to define Europe's story for years to come. Thanks so much for breaking it all down with me today on The Explainer.
喜欢这种学习方式，欢迎订阅我的频道，让我们一起用下一个10分钟，把商业英文变简单。